Yes, sir. We have started broadcasting YouTube and Facebook now. We can start research method workshop. The floor is yours, Mr. Raitai.
Okay, I'll share my screen.
It's visible, sir.
Okay, great. So greetings from Thailand to everyone.
Sir, you are not visible, but your presentation is visible.
All right. I hope you can see me now.
Yes, it's great now. We can start. Thank you.
Greetings from Thailand. I am with the University of Payap University, Department of Peace Studies. And this is my email if you want to reach me. My topic for today is validity and reliability in research. So I will try to cover all aspects of research, quantitative, qualitative, and also mixed research. Okay. This is the outline of my presentation. For the introduction, research has to be both reliable or consistent and valid. In fact, many journals where my students submit their papers ask them, prove that your findings are reliable and valid. You have to give us evidence in your methodology. So we take time to process that. Usually I help my students to get their papers published internationally and also in recognized presentations here and abroad. And let me see. Okay, it jumped too far. Okay, so the background is we are all involved in different kinds of research. For instance, there are people who do research on interfaith dialogue. There are people who do research on what is justice. And then I remember Dr. Amelia is doing both social science research, qualitative and quantitative. And today she showed us a qualitative research, focus group, interview. In the past, I've also seen her wonderful research using quantitative research. So we are all doing different kinds of research, but we also need to be both valid and reliable in all types of research that we do. This is a real problem. All of us have biases, which by itself is wrong, but we have to make it clear that we are biased when we write something and say, what are our biases? For example, we have bias for sustainability, making sure there's no climate change. Like Dr. Amelia's university will be moving to Kalimantan from Jakarta because it's sinking. It's a bias. It's a positive bias. And she made it clear. There should be no corruption, there should be nepotism, and all kinds of C in Indonesia. So this is something that we have to make clear. Because if not, people will say, how sure are we that is the message that is being given out? And it was clear, this is from the office of the leadership, that we should have these qualities when we transfer to Kalimantan. It will be a smart city, and so on and so forth. So if we don't do that, there'll be error in our research. But Dr. Amelia made it clear, this is what we are doing. Want to make sure there's no carbon emission, zero waste, and so on and so forth. So there's no misrepresentation. And the stakeholders also said, we want all of these, that there is transparency, accountability, and no corruption. Okay, so if we don't make this clear, then there will be problem in our research. Now, also, oftentimes we write research and make big claims. It's called overgeneralization. Do we have evidence? Who said that? Is it the people you interviewed or is it you? There's a big difference between you are overgeneralizing, but this is what the people whom you interviewed said. Okay, so always show evidence. The best evidence is give quotation, among others. This is what they wrote, this is what they said. Otherwise, people will say, we don't believe you. You don't have any source. Maybe they should be confidential, anonymous, but still you must have sources. Okay, that's one way of doing it. So there are different problems in different types of research. Sometimes because there are different interpretations, then the findings in qualitative research would be very different. One would say, no, we should not move to Kalimantan. Another say, we should move to Kalimantan. And another say, well, let's wait for Jakarta to sink before we move to Kalimantan. I know, that's crazy. So we have to be clear what is said, what is needed, what is to be done. And for quantitative research, many problems are due to measurement errors. Sometimes we give a yes or no answer when the answer should be strongly agree, neutral, disagree, strongly disagree. Because it will be very big difference when you say yes or no. Maybe sometimes somebody would say, we don't want to move to Kalimantan because, but it's not a no, but I have my roots, keluarga ko, kantor ko, everything is in Indonesia, in Jakarta. So I don't want to move. But those, you can weigh between important, urgent, necessary, or not necessary, or personal connection. So we can weigh the evidence and put what is more important than the other. If we have measurement errors, then we say, let's not move because all of my families and all of my business and all of my friends are in Jakarta. Then that would be an error in our research. And mixed method, sometimes we inadequately merge the two together. Or sometimes the question asked in the qualitative aspect of the interview, if it's a non-synchronous but sequential mixed method, meaning you do quantitative first and then qualitative first, but then you ask different questions not related to the quantitative question. Then it will be error because you ask different things. They're not related. So how can you put the two together when your hypothesis is 1, 2, 3 in your quantitative, but in your sequential interview after the quantitative research, you ask 4, 5, 6. Then it's a problem. You should be consistent in the questions that you ask in both qualitative and quantitative. Okay. Next is here when sometimes, many times, I think my students would make error in mixing data analysis with data interpretation and discussion. It's all mixed up. Data analysis in qualitative vocabulary, quantitative vocabulary is results, is strictly the facts and figures that you get from your respondents, from your collaborators, from the documents. But if you mix in your own ideas and opinion, that's not data analysis. Analysis means breaking down the component parts of what you found out. Data interpretation is when you can come in. You would say, okay, my findings or results in my research show that it's different from the findings of previous research. Let's say the Sinovac vaccine, they said it's efficacious, let's say at 90%. And then you have the Pfizer vaccine is 95% efficacious. Then you can say, you can dialogue with the literature and say, Sinovac is 90% efficacious. This is just number from nowhere I'm citing, just an example. Whereas Pfizer is has 95% efficacy. So you can enter into dialogue with the literature beyond what you have studied. But problems with students, sometimes they start with discussion, like why? You didn't show the data first? You must show the data first, facts and figures. It could be alphabet or numeric, but it should be what you got from the literature or from the people or organization whom you have interviewed. So we should be cautious and not mix one with the other. Okay, so and then problem also sometimes we have inconsistent results because we lack validity or accuracy and lack reliability or consistency. So, for example, we have conflicting findings in educational research because you were using different measurement tools. One would say we should look at IQ as a measurement of success. And another would say it should be life skills, should be the measurement of life success. So if you use two measurements, you will have two different findings. So we have to be careful when we come to conclusion if we are not using the same measurement tools. Okay. In qualitative research, the author's voice can come up in the discussion or can say upfront, these are my biases from the introductory section or in methodology, that we are climate friendly. So everything we do should be climate friendly or sustainable development goals friendly. So all of the 17 elements of the sustainable development goals, we will try to fulfill as much as we want. So that should be clear. In quantitative, you author's voice to come in the discussion section. Oftentimes, it's either in the results in discussion or and then you have conclusion, or sometimes it's results one section, discussion is the conclusion. So there are variations in coming up with the section, but we have to be clear. The author's voice is different from the source's voice. They are not the same. So you should make a distinction between what you said and what the people whom you interviewed said. Okay, so the gap is many times we lack checking for validity and reliability. And at least two of my students were asked this by a journal in the US. So we worked together and found solution to ensure validity and accuracy and consistency or reliability. And we did that. And then the papers were published after proving beyond doubt in the methodology section that they've done validity check and reliability check. Okay, gaps also, oftentimes people use the vocabulary reliability and validity just like that. However, there are different vocabularies for qualitative, quantitative, and mixed methods research when we talk about validity and reliability. So more gaps in the area. In qualitative research, there's limited comparative analysis in qualitative study. In quantitative study, there's lack also of focus on the measurement tools. It's okay if we use already proven tools. Let's say looking at the relationship, the family communication theory, and they have already some tool to measure that. Or the types of personalities, they're already tools. If we already use those tools, which are already tested with for validity and reliability, then we're okay. But if we make new tools, which is fine, we have to check for validity and reliability ourselves. And in mixed methods, it's lack of putting together the results in a more harmonious way, the qualitative findings and the quantitative findings. So why do we want to do this? For some reason. One, we need to enhance our understanding of research quality, and two, to provide an overview and practical guidelines. And three, as I've mentioned, some editors-in-chief and also anonymous peer reviewers demand proof written in the methodology section of papers submitted for journal publication that you check for validity and reliability. Now, so we want to enhance the trustworthiness in our research, so people will believe that it's not Dr. Amelia saying, but this is a national policy that we have to move to Kalimantan and we have to be environment friendly and we have to be a smart city where investors and other stakeholders will be attracted to invest in our new university. And for quantitative, we have to ensure that the measurement is that tool we use are accurate. And for mixed method, to be able to combine the two very well. Okay, so in one sentence, in one word, the simple definition of reliability is consistent interpretation. So whatever I do, qualitative or quantitative, it should yield the same results all the time. In validity is, can I trust what this paper is all about? Because sometimes your title talks about, for example, the national heritage. But then your research question talks about ethnic heritage. And then your findings talk about, on one end, one ethnic group, and then on another part, another ethnic group. So there's no consistency and there's no credibility. We don't believe that you are really doing national heritage because your paper is all over the place. So it has to be clear. If it's national heritage, everything in your paper should be about national heritage, not ethnic heritage, and not ethnic heritage A, ethnic heritage B. It should be clear all throughout the paper. So the rationale for being able to know about reliability and validity is to ensure that our papers are accurate and we can rely on them. And we will look at the different ways by which we look at validity and reliability in the three types of research, highlight the importance, give guidelines, and to foster rigorous research practice. So one, how do reliability and validity differ across different types of research? Two, what are some examples, okay, in qualitative, quantitative, mixed method research? And three, what happens if we don't check for reliability and validity in our research? Disaster happens, in one word. Okay, significance, we will improve the research integrity and credibility of our findings. And there will be impacts on policy, practice, and further research. And the beneficiaries are academics like us, researchers like us, practitioners like many of us, and policymakers who make laws which affect us or our institutions. So the scope of my presentation is three types of research: qualitative, quantitative, and mixed methods, and I'm doing a comparative analysis. The literature behind these are the following. Again, in the humanities, philosophy, natural sciences, social sciences. And in one word, again, just to remind you, reliability is we're looking at your findings as being consistent and accurate all the time from the beginning to the end. And validity is credibility. And then method-specific challenges. Qualitative research tend to be more subjective, context-specific. Nothing wrong with that. In fact, those are some strengths because we can talk about the specificity. Like Jakarta is sinking. That is very important. And not all cities are sinking. So not all people in different universities have to move. Only those many places which are sinking have to move to higher lands. And for quantitative research, you have to look at the precision of the measurement. And in mixed methods, we have to look at the integration of both data from qualitative and quantitative research. So there are challenges which can be dealt with. In qualitative paper, the challenges are subjectivity. So what do? the most important thing is peer debriefing, which means talk to people who are researchers like you, or your classmates if you're PhD students, or faculty members if you're faculty, or faculty mentoring students. So show the people your paper before you send it out for publication. And peers will find out what is missing or lacking in your paper. Member check means you quote some people, or you have some open-ended questions that people have answered. Go back to them. Member check means ask them, what I wrote, does it honestly represent what you meant? So go back to them, and if they say this is a little bit off, why don't you rewrite it this way? Then you have done member check. Okay, member check is go back to the sources of information, especially if it's focus group or interview, or even for field observation and exposure and immersion in the community, if you're doing ethnographic research. And triangulation means you are checking facts and figures from all sources, from documents, from photographs, from government records, from what people say. So how do we know Jakarta is sinking? So triangulate, find out from all possible sources. The Ministry of Natural Resources, the Climate Change Office, the City Hall of Jakarta, the academicians who publish papers, and so on and so forth. Try to look for all sources of information and say that all of them concur that Jakarta is sinking. And for quantitative, the problem is measurement precision. So sometimes if we create our own measurements, the people whom you want to administer the instrument would say, we don't understand what you said. So do a pilot test. In fact, I have a recently published co-authored paper with 3 other Thai professors, and we pilot tested. This was a mixed method paper. We pilot tested the instrument to find out if the people understood what we wanted to do, if it was clear, and if we should make changes or we should just go ahead. And we use the Cronbach's and alpha to check for statistical correctness in what we're doing. And in the mixed method is, again, how to triangulate, put together the qualitative and quantitative. Methodology. For qualitative research, we usually, but it doesn't mean we don't have to, start with the facts, with the phenomenon, with the social reality. But it doesn't mean we cannot be guided by theory. In fact, some journals, Scopus journals, would say, yes, we know, qualitative paper does not need theory, but it might help if in the background, some theory guides your paper. So it's not a very strict rule of not having, because it's inductive, but it does not mean we come on a blank slate. All of us have some theories behind us, especially we've been doing research and reading so many books, thousands of books and theories. Quantitative tends to be deductive. We start with a premise, like a hypothesis. And many humanities papers too start with the thesis statement. You're proving that the Roman Empire was squashed by the Ottoman Empire, something like that. Then you come up with a claim, and then you'll prove that yes, the Ottoman Empire was able to quash the Roman Empire. Okay, so that's deductive. If you use a thesis statement or a hypothesis, then you are being deductive. However, I've also come across, I've written social science paper, and a few times already, 2 times at least, one of the reviewers is from the humanities and does not understand why I have research questions, and he doesn't know my main point, because the reviewer wants to see a central thesis or a thesis statement. So I realized we come from two very different disciplines, but I want to be published. So what do? So I don't say you are wrong. That's one way of not being published, especially if it's minor, it's not a major issue. Just add a thesis statement. It does not hurt you. I just kept my research questions because the reviewers from philosophy, he does not know the meaning of and the purpose of research questions. He or she only knows I should have a thesis statement because the reviewers from theology, divinity, and philosophy, 2 or 3 times at least. I think maybe 3 times now. So it happens that my paper is social science, but the humanities and philosophy person reviews my paper and wants to see my paper written as a philosophy or humanities paper. It's no big deal. I just add what they want. It doesn't hurt my social scientific paper. I just add what they want, a central thesis. This is a tip for you, for all. Don't fight with the reviewer, especially if you can just add. It doesn't hurt you. Okay. Now, reflexivity is a very new, not so new, because when I was doing my doctorate a long time ago, when I wrote about women's rights, the editor-in-chief said, "Who are you to write about women? You are a man. You have to show us your positionality." So that was like, I don't know, late 1990s or 2000, somewhere there. So they want me to say, although I am a man, I have my heart in the right place for equality of men and women. So I have to write it down. It's not like they guess. It has to be very crystal clear. And one student also, another student who published in the most prestigious institution in Thailand, the National Institute for Development Administration, was asked reflexivity. I said, don't worry, it's very easy. They just want you to know, why are you writing about xenophobia in South Africa? You are from Asia. How does it affect you? So he just has to say, my heart is in the right place. I may be Asian, but I don't want any form of racial discrimination anywhere in the world, including South Africa. And they accepted it. So some journals want you to be so clear. You have to say, who are you and why are you doing research on something which is not related to you? Like you're Asian, but you fight for the rights of South African, Black South African. Okay, so, and then in quantitative, we have to recognize also our biases. So it's more new now because the traditional peer reviewers don't ask that. But I guess the younger peer reviewers ask this all the time. Why are you writing about something not related to you or to your country? Okay, so we have to acknowledge our research biases. Okay, so to ensure validity and reliability. In qualitative research, like Dr. Armela showed us, many themes emerge. She showed us in her discussion earlier. In quantitative, it's statistical. But if you do mixed method, it's both alpha-numeric findings. Okay, findings for this. Reliability and validity are conceptualized differently across the different methodologies. And in fact, they require method-specific strategies, and we will go over them one by one. Okay, validity, the vocabulary in quantitative research is validity. It's the extent to which you are actually measuring what you are actually measuring. You cannot say, my paper wants to prove democracy works. But then inside your paper, you talk about freedom. They may be related, but they're not the same. They're totally not the same. So you cannot, that's a slippery slope. You use, oh, it's a synonym. No, it's not a synonym. Democracy, as people who know Greek, demos and kratos or kratein, the power or the rule of the people. And freedom is to be free. It's very different from democracy. So we cannot mix words that we think are synonym. In fact, one time I wrote a paper on AI, ethics of AI on religion. The one reviewer told me, why do you use different vocabulary? Why don't you stick to the same vocabulary? So I also learned it's easier for the reviewers if you stick to the same vocabulary. So we know what you're actually measuring, what you're actually studying. If you switch vocabulary, they might say, oh, you're studying something else. So the simpler, the better. Okay? The fewer keywords, the better. Anyway, in most research, we only are allowed 5 keywords, right? In most journals, 5 keywords. They don't really mean words, like 5 phrases, okay? And then for qualitative research, they use credibility, transferability, confirmability as the vocabulary when they talk about validity. And for reliability in quantitative, the qualitative vocabulary is dependability. Okay, so there are different sets of vocabulary. So we know what you're doing, qualitative research or quantitative research or mixed method. Now, here are example of qualitative validity. Using multiple data sources, such as interview and observation, so 2 different sources, you will triangulate the findings to increase the validity of the data. For example, we're saying that Jakarta is sinking, and somebody says, oh, it's sinking 25 feet today. But you can see it's not true. It's not 25 feet under. So triangulate means you go further. Ask experts, go to the literature, go to the science offices, the scientific community, and find out. So you can reject the opinion of one person that says, right now, today, Jakarta is already 25 feet below sea level. Cannot be, because if it's below sea level, everyone should be swimming already, no more ground floor. But some people make those claims. So to fight the error, you have to triangulate, find other sources. And for quantitative research, again, be clear, what is your independent variable and what is your dependent variable? For example, you want to study family communication style. And then you want to check what will be your independent variable. Is it the children, or is it daughters versus sons in relation to the family? Because those are 2 different things. One is age, the other is sex. But if you want to do both, make it clear. You can say independent variable A is sex, male, female. Independent variable B is just children, regardless of male or female. But the findings will be different. So if you mix them up, your findings will be all mixed up. In fact, I'm working on a paper right now on this, making a distinction between male and female, as opposed to just children versus the elders or their parents. We're submitting this paper soon. Okay, so there are many more things to look at, but due to lack of time, you can just look at these. I'll share them on my academia.edu. If you find me, you can download from there. There's construct validity, content validity, convergent validity, discriminant validity, external validity, internal validity, and so on and so forth, with many examples. Okay, so some reliable strategies, as I've mentioned earlier, would be peer debriefing, member check for qualitative, and triangulation. These are the most common. And also 4th would be reflexivity. Just tell them you have your bias. You're in favor of climate protection. You're in favor of equality between the sexes. You're in favor of non-discrimination. Make that clear, crystal clear, and so on and so forth. For quantitative pilot testing would be 1. Before you conduct your research, do a pilot test or with a smaller sampling, okay, maybe in a smaller region instead of a national region. Okay, let me go on further. Let me skip. I don't want to go to too much details. Okay, this is now the third research question. So what happens if you don't have good validity check or it's very poor? Then it undermines the credibility of your research. No one would believe you. Or maybe the peer reviewer would or the editor-in-chief will just reject your paper at the worst case. But in the best case, they'll say, why don't you prove that you've done validity and so resubmit, which happened to at least 2 of my students, and they were published afterwards. And then validity ensures that researchers draw accurate conclusion. So maybe you were not able to draw accurate conclusion because you did not do validity check. And therefore, your paper is rendered useless if you don't do that. Okay, I listed 20 implications. 1, you inaccurately represented the phenomenon. 2, you have misleading conclusion. 3, you have invalid generalization. 4, you have incorrect theoretical implications. Remember I said whether you're doing qualitative or quantitative research or its variant of mixed methods, editors-in-chief would still say it's not required in qualitative, but it's good that you mentioned some theories which are behind the back of your mind when you're writing this paper. And number 5, misinterpret the relationship between variables. For example, you said you want to prove that children are now behaving differently in relationship to their parents. But then your test was not children, which is age. Rather, your test was girl child versus male child, boy child. So those are totally 2 different research. So make it clear if you make a distinction between girl child and boy child, or you just talk about children vis-a-vis parents. Okay, so you might misinterpret the relationship if you have wrong variables, which are not used consistently throughout the paper. And you will give wrong policy recommendation and practice. Like if you believe that 25 people say Jakarta is now 25 feet below sea level, then you will get faulty practice recommendations. Like, I don't know what, build a swimming pool or whatever, because it's totally wrong premise. Okay. And then number 7, people will not trust you anymore. Oh, sorry. And number 8, you cannot transfer your findings to other areas because you have invalid results to begin with. Excuse me. 9, flawed basis for further research. You cannot proceed because you have error in your research. 10, there are issues, ethical issues, because you have false findings. 11, you have errors. These are statistical errors. And 12, biases in data interpretation. From faulty facts and figures, you will have faulty data interpretation. And number 13, your findings has no impact on the real world. Number 14, you are not effectively dealing with your research question. Number 15, you are not supporting theoretical models. Number 16, you could potentially mislead policymakers and stakeholders. Number 17, inefficient in addressing practical problems. Number 18, inability to contribute to scientific knowledge. Number 19, not reliable for follow-up studies. And 20, misguided further research direction in your conclusion. Okay, now let's go to reliability. How can you ensure that your research is consistent? In qualitative, the vocabulary is dependability and consistency. In quantitative, it's called reliability. Okay, example, use the same interview protocol or the same guide questions that you're prepared to collect data from different people to ensure that the answers will be consistent. Whether you hire research assistants in 10 cities, it does not matter because they're following one set of interview protocols of the same question. Okay, and for quantitative research, again, use the same survey questionnaire for a large sample. But if you revise it for further study for the same paper, it might mess up. Especially in quantitative, it's more rigid. In qualitative, it's more open. You can revise in your qualitative paper backwards and forward. In quantitative, once you have your hypothesis, you stick to your hypothesis and you cannot change the variables. Because if you change independent variable A to independent variable B, it's a totally different paper. And for mixed method research, you should be able to replicate the research, meaning if anyone else will do the research, they will be able to yield the same findings. Okay. Yeah, these are now details. There are all kinds. There is internal, there's external, there's intercoder. Maybe let me talk about intercoder. That's another important tool. That two of the reviewers asked my students, prove that the findings you got were consistent and prove it by intercoder reliability. Oh, in fact, sorry, it's not student, it's me. I had 3 co-authors, we were all 4. But we had to document in our methodology. We met every week, like Thursday afternoon at 2 p.m., and we all code the results from the Google form, and then we transfer it to Microsoft document, and we all analyze the data, and we all have the same results. So intercoder means I am one coder, and the second professor is a second coder, third professor is third coder, the fourth professor is a fourth coder. And we all came up with the same exact numbers. So we can prove beyond doubt that the facts and figures represented are accurate. So that's intercoder reliability. We thought that we just do it, but the reviewers don't know that the journals want us to document it. So many things we just assume we do. We cannot just assume. We have to write them down. Because some journals ask us, write down that you have checked for reliability. For example, intercoder reliability. And we've done that. So we were glad that we've done that. We just have to document it. Okay, there are many other ways of doing this. I will not go to that. I'll just talk about the implications of if you don't do reliability check. So there are 20. Inconsistent result over time. You cannot repeat the research. People cannot have confidence in research. You cannot compare this with other studies. You cannot replicate it. It has no predictive power. Errors in measurement, even random errors, fluctuation results, definitely, therefore unreliable results, and so on and so forth. So all of these will yield bad paper if you don't do both validity and reliability tests. Strength of each type of research. Qualitative is rich in data. It has in-depth insight. Quantitative does not have in-depth insight, but is more precise. It's easily reproducible. And mixed method, you have both, best of both worlds. Weakness of qualitative research. It could be very subjective. And each time you ask somebody, depending on their mood, their income, their fights with their family members, they might give another answer the next time you meet them. So it's not easily replicable. For quantitative research, their weakness is they don't care about the context. So they cannot really look at Jakarta as a specific paper. That's why Dr. Armelia used the qualitative research to study moving from Jakarta to Kalimantan. Okay, so recommendation when you do research, qualitative research, do triangulation using different methods, do member check, go back to your research collaborators, do peer debriefing, talk with peers who are your faculty members, researchers, or PhD students. And for quantitative research, use standardized procedures. And for mixed methods, you must clearly integrate properly both qualitative and quantitative research. I'll skip this. And conclusion, you need to have validity and reliability in your research, and different strategies are needed to ensure both validity and reliability. So once you do that, your research will be more trustworthy, reliable, and can be applied to other instances. But limitation would be, it's hard to automatically assume your research could apply to other cases, especially for qualitative research. So who cares? Researchers, academicians, policymakers, and practitioners care about these two things. And in conclusion, who benefits? It's all of us. And we can ensure that we have high-level research outputs. And so what? So we have to go and make better research outputs and write them down in methodology, how we ensure validity and reliability, as I was asked by some peer reviewers. And there are recommendations for policy, recommendations for practice, recommendations for research. And in closing, this is a call to action. Researchers must rigorously apply these concepts to enhance the trustworthiness and applicability of our research before we send them out for review in academic journals. Thank you. I pass on the mic back to Kerim KARADAL.
Dear Raitai, thank you very much for your great workshop.
Thank you.
We informed a lot. And is there any question from the floors to Mr. Raitai?
Yes, may I ask something?
Yes, of course.
Dr. Tai, how if you are doing a case study research, what kind of validity and reliability, and what are the protocols in a case study research?
Yeah, when you do case study, I think this is a problem which there were about 25 researchers. I just came back from Germany. We had 25 researchers from all over the world, and we had an expert came to talk about research. We were all shocked because many were doing case studies. But then this so-called expert tell us there's one way to do best research. This is one way only to do research, and you must make sure that your research is applicable in general to all cases. We were all shocked because we were all PhD people with doctorate, or some were PhD students. Say, no, in case study, it's not generalizable. It's a case study. The beauty of case study is you're looking at the specific context. In fact, Harvard Business School, in fact, Dr. Amelia, submit that to Harvard Case Study Journal. They love case study. They don't do big data set. Harvard does not do big data. They look at one case, and you are looking at the case of your university. It's the most powerful case you can present to the Harvard Case Study Journal. Okay, you don't need to say it can be replicated, that it can be transferred. Those are not your concern. Your concern is you're able to develop rich data. You're able to provide thick description. Clifford Geertz wrote about Indonesia. He wrote a famous book about thick description. So it can give a lot of details. And to do reliability and validity tests, Three things: peer debriefing. Before peer debriefing, sorry, first do member check. Go back to the people whom you interviewed, or to the government documents, or to the government office. Is this what they actually said? And then go back to the stakeholders. Is this what you actually say? Is my draft a correct interpretation of what you said? That's called member check. Two, you do peer debriefing. Show your work to other faculty members or researchers. It could be from your department, or even like the CEO Congress with a special meeting. And people will pinpoint what you lack or what you don't lack. And third is, excuse me, triangulation. So use as many sources as you can. And then to show that your case study is really solid. Okay, so again, the danger of some people who are doing only quantitative research and big number, they assume all research should be replicable and transferable to all cases. No, case study shows uniqueness. So you should not worry about whether it can be replicated. Maybe it could be, but that's not the main concern. Yeah, thank you, Dr. Amelia.
Thank you.
Thank you, Amalia, and thank you, Raitai. Thank you, Amalia, for adding value. Is there any question to Raitai? I think there is no question. Raitai, thank you very much for your great presentation for this research method workshop.
Thank you so much.
We can start the next session, the first normal session of the day for channel 1. Channel 2 already started. The analogy